Steve Bannon and 3 other people were indicted in federal court in the Southern District of New York with basically 2 charges. The first is a conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and the second is a conspiracy to engage in money laundering. Let's break down these charges. For the first charge, a conspiracy to commit wire fraud, the government has to prove that Bannon and these other individuals came together and made an agreement to make false statements or misrepresentations to the public to get money that they were not lawfully entitled to. In this specific case, the government is alleging that these folks created and ran We Build the Wall Foundation, which was an attempt to solicit donations from the public for the private construction of a border wall between the United States and Mexico. Specifically, the government alleges that these individuals made false statements on the website, in communications with potential donors, and to the crowdfunding website that was hosting this particular group, that none of the money sent in, none of the donations would be used for salary or to pay the people who were on the board. But the government alleges that that's exactly what happened. The government says specifically Bannon arranged to have $1 million of the $25 million that was raised for this project sent to a nonprofit group that he controlled, and then he took that $1 million, paid one of the other people who are charged, the director of the group, and then kept some of the money for himself to use for personal expenses. Now, is that wire fraud? Under federal law, wire fraud involves a false representation made to get money. So the government would have to prove that, number one, Bannon actually made false representations or caused those representations to be made, or, in a conspiracy, had an agreement with others knowing that those false statements would be made. In this indictment, the government's saying that that's exactly what happened. Bannon approved the statements that were being made that said all of the money is going to the construction of the wall and nobody's going to take any in terms of salary. If Bannon knew those statements were going to be made and he knew the purpose, which was to generate the money, then he could be guilty of a conspiracy to commit wire fraud. It's a serious offense. It carries up to 20 years in prison. But the actual sentence will depend upon the amount of money involved. And that's going to be a very interesting issue in this case. Will the amount of money be the entire $25 million? Will it be the $1 million that was sent to the nonprofit? Or for each defendant, will it just be the amount of money that they took home? The second charge is a conspiracy to engage in money laundering. If they're not guilty of the first charge, they're not guilty of the second charge, because money laundering requires the government to prove that the individuals were engaging in transactions using money that was derived from an unlawful activity. In other words, proceeds of a crime. So if there's no wire fraud, there's no money laundering. But if there is wire fraud, and you take the money that you generated through wire fraud and then try to conceal it, use shell companies, bank accounts, fraudulent invoices, which the government claims happened in this case, then that can be a money laundering offense, and that's a separate crime from the wire fraud. It also carries up to 20 years in prison, but again, the exact sentence will be based on the amount of money involved in the case. All of these individuals are innocent until proven guilty. The facts of the case, I think, will come out over time, but obviously the key factors will be what statements were made to the public and who knew about them. How did the money move from the donations through these different nonprofits and shell companies to the individuals who received the payments? And was there an actual agreement between all of these individuals to cheat these people out of money? In other words, did they know these false statements were being made in order to profit from it unlawfully? We'll see.